Hi, I'm Valeria Popov, and welcome to the Supercharged Plant-Based Lifestyle Show. I reversed my gestational diabetes, got off insulin, lost weight, and sustained my weight loss. And I got rid of allergies and constant constipation. And I did it by transitioning to a plant-based, exclusively whole food lifestyle. And today I want to share with you one of the biggest parts of my weight loss journey, and it's the book, Never Binge Again. And today I'm interviewing Dr. Glenn Livingston. Hello, Dr. Livingston.
Hi, please call me Glenn. Hi, nice to see you, Valeria.
Thank you so much for being here with us today and sharing your knowledge. It's priceless for me, for sure. Thank you.
I'm very happy to be here. I was looking forward to this. Anything for a fellow plant-based person.
Oh, thank you, thank you. So would you please introduce yourself and what you do for people who might not know you?
I could do that in 2 minutes or I can do that in 30 minutes. Depends upon how much you want to know. So I am a psychologist by training, and I had a child and family practice for a long time. But I was married for 28 years, and she traveled for business. So we never had kids. So I didn't commute. I had a lot of time for a second career. And in my late 20s and 30s, I consulted for industry, mostly the big food industry, but also big pharma, some other things. And I was on the wrong side of the war. And I saw a lot of things that were happening in the food industry that turned out to be part and parcel of my own food addiction. I had a very serious overeating problem. I was about 280 pounds, I think. I stopped weighing myself at 257. It's about 280. I had psoriasis and rosacea and eczema and triglycerides above 1,000 at some point, and the doctors were telling me I was going to die soon. And I found that I couldn't solve the problem with all the psychological methods that I'd always thought would work. And I discovered a really weird way to do it. And so now I wound up publishing it as a book. I wound up publishing my journal as a book in 2015, and it just took off. And we have almost 1 million copies in distribution. So that's what I do now. I have a network of coaches, and I've written 7 more books, and I dedicate myself to helping 1 million people a year stop overeating. That's the mission of the business. So I can tell you more or less about my personal journey, more or less about any part of that if you want to, but that's who I am, and that's what I do.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. Why are overeating, stress eating, and binge eating so prevalent in our culture today?
Well, I think that we have a lot of mistaken notions, which are then coupled with industrial incentive to produce things that make us overeat. So I don't think that we have a disease. I think that every time we are looking for love at the bottom of our bag or a box or a container, there's some fat cat in a white suit with a mustache just laughing all the way to the bank. But when I consulted for big food, what I saw was that they're busy engineering, like millions, if not billions of dollars are going into engineering these hyper-palatable food-like substances. They're concentrations of starch and sugar and fat and oil and excitotoxins, and they're aimed at targeting our lizard brain to hit the bliss point, all those evolutionary buttons, without giving us the nutrition to feel satisfied. And so when you mess with the pleasure systems like that, you're actually kind of hijacking the survival drive. I remember a series of animal studies in the late 50s and early 60s where they placed electrodes in the brains of rats in the pleasure centers, and they wired those electrodes to a lever, and they allow the rat to press it at will to self-stimulate. And do you know what happened with those rats?
No.
You want to guess? They pressed the lever thousands of times a day. They would ignore their survival needs. A nursing mother rat would ignore her pups. A starving rat would ignore its food. They would crawl over painful electrical grids to press the lever thousands of times per day. They forgot about their survival needs. When you overstimulate the pleasure centers of a mammalian brain, in ways that evolution didn't really design to happen, then the survival drive shifts towards that artificially concentrated source of pleasure. And I don't think that people are putting electrodes in our brain. I don't think the aliens are kidnapping us at night or something. But on the other hand, you walk out of a McDonald's and there's a Burger King across the street in just about every city in the country. I think there are chemical electrodes in some ways. So, so, I think that you put those millions, if not billions of dollars into pushing those pleasure buttons. And then the advertising industry is actually very good. People think advertising doesn't affect them, but it actually affects you more if you think it doesn't affect you, because your sales resistance is down. So they have you just where they want you. And there are 5,000 to 7,000 messages per year coming at us over the internet and the airwaves, all about, all about food. But how many of them are for eating more fruits and vegetables? Like maybe a half a dozen. So you have that. I'll give you an example of the kind of thing that happens in the advertising agency, in the advertising world. I was working with a major food bar manufacturer, and the VP of marketing pulled me aside and he said, "I'm leaving the company. I got to tell you something." I said, "What?" And he said, "Well, the most profitable insight here was to take the vitamins out of the bar, and we put the money into the packaging instead, because we made the packaging bright and a diversity of divergent colors. And in nature, sparkling bright diversity of color signals a diversity of nutrients. Think of a salad where you're supposed to eat the rainbow, green lettuce and yellow carrots and purple cabbage and blueberries and red tomatoes, and you eat the rainbow and you get this diversity of micronutrients. That's what your evolutionary brain knows, but here they are faking us out. They're faking us out. And that goes on all across the industry. It's not just the food manufacturers. So you've got big food that's overstimulating these buttons. You've got big advertising that's telling you need these things to survive, and they're really good at making you believe that. And then you have the addiction treatment industry that says you can't quit even if you want to. These are irresistible impulses. The best you can do is abstain one day at a time. You need a sponsor. You need to go to meetings. You need to make yourself dependent and admit that you're powerless and that you have a disease. And like I said, I don't think we have a disease. I think we've got a healthy appetite that's corrupted by industry. And then I'll stop in a minute. People tell you, there's a common notion in the culture that you should use guidelines as opposed to rules. Just eat well 90% of the time and indulge yourself 10% of the time, right? Which is a good idea in theory, because if you did that, you would probably be reasonably healthy. The problem is that it requires you to make constant decisions throughout the day about whether this is the 90% or the 10%. You're in Starbucks in front of a chocolate bar. Is this part of the 10% that you can eat indulgently, or is this part of the 10% that you can't? It turns out that that wears down your willpower. Constant decision making wears down your willpower. So what you want to do instead is use hard and fast rules that make your decisions for you and eliminate the need for willpower. So if you want to have chocolate, for example, 10% of the time, what you want to do is make a rule that says, well, I'll only ever have chocolate on the last 3 days of the calendar month. That's 3 out of 30 more or less. That's 10%, but all your chocolate decisions are made all month long. So why is it a perfect storm to produce overeating? Because big food, big advertising, big addiction treatment, and because of the confusion about how we're supposed to manage food in the first place. So that's what I think. I could go on, but those are the main reasons.
Thank you. Thank you so much. What makes you, Dr. Glenn Livingston, uniquely qualified to comment?
Well, I had a really serious problem myself. If you've been to the Woodbury Country Deli in Syosset, or you stopped at a 7-Eleven near there in the 90s, the odds are that they were out of pizza and Pop-Tarts because I got there before you. So it's that kind of thing. I'm 6'4", I'm moderately muscular, and when I was an adolescent, I figured out if I worked out for a couple hours a day, I could eat whatever I wanted to. Whole pizzas or two, whole boxes of chocolate, whole boxes of muffins, whole Dunkin' Donuts. What do they call those little munchkins? They were really good. And I could eat whole boxes, and I wouldn't gain weight. I would just I would exercise it off. I would poop a lot. I would sleep a lot, and I thought I had a good life, no problem at all, right? But when I got a little older and I was married and commuting 2 hours away each way to graduate school to see patients and take classes, and I was helping to run the family business. I just couldn't work out. I couldn't work out like that. I could barely work out for, you know, a half an hour twice a week, much less 2 hours a day. And I found that food had a life of its own. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I couldn't stop eating it. So I'd be sitting with suicidal patients and I'd be thinking, when can I get a Pop-Tart? Um, and I felt very guilty about it. I felt like, thankfully I never lost anybody. And I saw a lot of people like that. I saw a lot of couples getting divorced, getting over an affair, and only 2 of them ever got divorced out of hundreds of couples that I saw. But I felt really guilty because I couldn't be 100% present. So I spent a lifetime, really 25, 30 years, looking for a psychological answer. I figured there must be a hole in my heart, and that's why I can't fill the hole in my stomach. I'm trying to fill a hole in my heart. And so I went to therapy. I saw the best psychologists in the area. I saw psychiatrists. I took medication. I went to nutritionists. I went to Overeaters Anonymous. And it was a very soulful journey, a very, very soulful journey, which I don't regret taking, but I would learn something about myself. I'd feel a little calmer. I would lose weight, and then I'd gain more. And so ultimately I conducted this. There were 2 other things that really taught me to flip the paradigm and stop trying to love myself thin and instead just take control of things like an alpha wolf. One of them was the big food industry, but the other 2 were, I started reading more about the neurology of addiction, and it looked to me like most of what was responsible for addiction were the survival drives erroneously directed from the reptilian brain, from the most primitive part of the brain, or the part that's most, some people don't believe in evolution. Some people, it doesn't really matter if God put it there or whatever, it still has the same function. It's the part of the brain that's responsible for feast and famine, for fight or flight, for the very protective survival responses. And this part of the brain, let's represent it with my fist, the lower part of the brain, the brainstem. This part of the brain knows eat, mate, or kill. It doesn't know love. So here I am, spending a lifetime trying to love myself out of a food addiction, but the part of the brain that's responding to addiction, it's like a college drinking game, eat, mate, or kill. It's the mammalian brain that comes on top of that says, wait a minute, before you eat, mate, or kill that thing, what impact will that have on the people that you love, on your tribe, on your, everybody's well-being? This is the part that starts to understand love. And then the neocortex is on top of that says, wait a minute, before you eat, mate, or kill that thing, what impact does this have on your long-term goals? What impact does this have on, weight loss and fitness, but also spirituality and music and art and your contribution to society and everything like that? And so I said, so when I'm trying to love myself thin and I'm at Starbucks and there's a chocolate bar on the counter with my name on it, and I hear this little voice in my head that says, you might as well just start tomorrow. It's no problem. You worked out hard enough today anyway. I say, wait a minute, if I'm trying to love this thing more, I'm just going to let it run rampant through me. I have to take control of this thing like an alpha wolf. The last thing was I did this study, did this 40,000 person study over the course of many years on the internet when internet clicks were cheap. And I asked people as they were searching to solve stressful problems in their life, what was stressing them out and what food did they turn to that they couldn't stop eating? And I found out that people who turned to chocolate tended to be stressed out by their love life. They were lonely or brokenhearted or a little depressed. People who struggled with salty, crunchy things tended to be struggling with stress at work, and people who struggled with pasta and bagels and like soft, chewy, starchy things, they tended to be stressed at home. And I went to my mom and I asked her about this because she's the therapist and she raised me. And I said, Mom, I did this study. I think I'm figuring something out. Why do I go to chocolate when I feel depressed? Yes, I'm not happy in the marriage, so it's true I'm a little lonely, but where does this really come from? And she gets this horrible look on her face and she says, Glenn, I'm so sorry. I said, Mom, what? She says, I'm so sorry. But when you were 1 year old in 1965, your dad, my husband, was a captain in the Army, and they were talking about sending him to Vietnam, and I was terrified. So at the same time, my father, your grandfather, was just getting out of prison, and I didn't know he was guilty. I'd idolized him my whole life, but he was guilty, and I was horribly depressed about it. So I'm most of the time sitting and staring at the wall, feeling anxious and depressed, and here you are coming to me for love or for food or for to play or do something healthy, and I couldn't do it because I'm sitting and staring at the wall. So I get a refrigerator and I put it on the floor. And in that refrigerator, I put a big bottle of chocolate Bosco syrup and I say, Glenn, go get your Bosco. And whenever I couldn't deal with you, I just sent you off to get your Bosco, and you'd open up the bottle and you'd suck on it and you go into a chocolate sugar coma. And then I could resume staring at the wall. And she feels really guilty. And, Valeria, if this was a movie at this point, Mom and I would have a big hug and a big cry, and I'd never have trouble with chocolate again, right? But my chocolate eating actually got worse. And the reason it got worse was because there was this little voice of justification inside me. It went something like, wow, you know what, Glenn, you're right. Our mama didn't love us enough, and she left a great big chocolate-sized hole in our heart. And until we can find the love of our life and get out of this marriage, we're going to have to go right on bitching, yippee, let's go get some more right now. And so then I realized that I switched the model. Then I said, I have to be more like an alpha wolf controlling this urge inside of me, the same way that I take charge of other biological urges, right? Like if I see an attractive woman on the street, I don't run up and kiss her. If I really had to pee right now, I wouldn't run off in the middle of the meeting. I'd finish the meeting first. Very powerful biological urges, but I don't do anything about it because I'm in charge and I'm a civilized human being and I have other goals and ways that I want to present myself in the world. So my the other thing that I realized was that if you think of the emotion as a fire, you could have a roaring fire in a well-contained fireplace, and that becomes an asset, not a liability. It becomes the center of hearth and home. People gather around and they hug and they laugh and they cry and they tell stories. It becomes the center of hearth and home. It's only if there is a crack in the fireplace that an ember can get out and burn down the house. And I say, well, maybe what's going on is that there's this voice of justification that's poking holes in the fireplace. And it doesn't matter. Maybe I don't have to solve the emotional problem. Maybe I'll always be a little bit lonely, right? Until I find the love of my life, which is no easy task to do. Maybe I'll always be a little bit lonely, but who cares? I can erect a fireplace that will contain that feeling so that I don't have to binge because of it. And so here's what I did. This is a little embarrassing for a sophisticated psychologist like me, who's done tens of millions of dollars of consulting and have seen hundreds of patients. But what I actually wound up doing to recover myself is I decided that I'm going to call my reptilian brain my inner pig. And I'm going to draw, I'm a vegan now, by the way, so I really chose the wrong metaphor, but it worked. I'm going to call it my inner pig. And I'm going to draw a very clear line in the sand to distinguish healthy versus unhealthy behavior. So one example of that might be, I will never have chocolate during the week again. I'm conscious of the time also. You can interrupt me when you need to. I'm never going to have chocolate during the week again. And if I was in Starbucks and I heard a little voice that said, Glenn, you worked out hard enough today and it's just as easy to start tomorrow. Go ahead and get the chocolate. I would say, wait a minute, that's not me. That's my inner pig. Chocolate is pig slop during the week. I don't eat pig slop. I don't let farm animals tell me what to do. And as crude as that sounds, as primitive and ridiculous as it was, it would wake me up and give me those extra microseconds at the moment of impulse to make the right decision if I wanted to. And slowly but surely, it wasn't a miracle. What was a miracle is I no longer felt confused or powerless. I felt like I had my free will back. I didn't always make the right decision originally. And then over time, I started making the right decision and I changed the rules and I came up with rules I could live with and I got better. So yeah, that's the rest of my story.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing so vulnerably with us your story and your way to find the way out of it.
Yeah.
Let me see. I have so many questions.
Whatever you want.
What does commit with perfection, but forgive yourself with dignity means?
So in our culture, when it comes to food, we're taught to pursue progress and not perfection. Just like do the best you can. But if you talk to real performers and winners, like if you talk to an Olympic archer or a mountain climber, um, the Olympic archer, as they're aiming at the bullseye, is not thinking maybe I'll hit it and maybe I won't. I'm just going to do the best I can. That's not what they're thinking. They're aiming with perfection. They're becoming one with the bullseye, and they can almost see the arrow going into the bullseye before they let go of the rope of the bow. If they miss, then they analyze by how much did they miss, in what direction, and what specific adjustments do they have to make. And they don't say, oh my God, I'm a pathetic archer. I might as well shoot the rest of the arrows up in the air or into the audience. They make an analysis. They take it seriously. They take the fact that they missed seriously. They make an analysis. They make an adjustment, and they stand up and aim with perfection again. I call that committing with perfection, but forgiving yourself with dignity. If you accidentally touch a hot stove, you want to feel that pain for a moment, because if you didn't feel the pain, you wouldn't know where the stove was. And there are disorders in this world where children can't feel pain. They're born without the ability to feel pain, and they die at 4 or 5 years old because they don't know where the sharp edges are. Right? They can't use the pain to learn. By the same token, when you touch the hot stove, what you don't want to do is say, oh my God, I'm a pathetic hot stove toucher. I might as well put my whole hand down on the stove. That's what you don't want to do. You want to take it seriously. You want to figure out how are you going to avoid it in the future. And then you want to go about your life and commit to living your life with perfection again. So the attitude of winners, if you're constantly aiming at a well-defined bullseye and you're making an analysis when you miss and you get up and you aim it again, we are learning machines. That's how our neurology is set up. We're learning machines. You have to get better. If you're aiming at a fuzzy bullseye, if you get caught up in the guilt afterwards, then you won't learn. Then you won't learn. And so it turns out, this is a really interesting insight. What the pig wants to do after you make a mistake by beating you down and saying that you're pathetic and you're never going to get this and you're always going to be fat and you've tried 1,000 times before and you keep falling down. What it wants to do is make you feel too weak to aim at the bullseye again. It wants you to feel too weak to resist the next binge. So it's trying that negative voice that goes on and on and on afterwards, after a binge, is actually binge motivated in and of itself. That's a piercing insight. And if you understand that and you refuse to yell at yourself for mistakes, you will find yourself getting better. If that's the only thing people took away from this, is that I'm not going to yell at myself for mistakes. I'm going to figure out what I did wrong. I'm going to figure out what I did right. I'm going to collect evidence of success. I'm going to build a success identity. I'm going to get up and aim again. Valeria, do you know that when you look at the research on the distinction between people who lose weight permanently and people who yo-yo diet, that the primary distinction is the number of times that they've tried before? So the people who lose weight permanently have more trials behind them. It turns out that the path to success is through repeated failure. So your pig says you've obviously failed so many times before, your likelihood of success is ridiculous. But the truth is that by pointing out those previous failures, it's actually pointing out that you're more likely to succeed the next time. So commit with perfection, forgive yourself with dignity, fall down 7 times, get up 8. Keep going. The name of the game is staying in the game until you win the game.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. It's so powerful. Thank you so much. Do people have to give up a specific foods, or can you learn how to control them?
My program is diet agnostic. So I'm whole foods plant-based, but a lot of my clients aren't. And I'm not a nutritionist or a dietitian, so it's not really my place to preach what foods you should or shouldn't eat. That said, I don't think there's any doctor out there that's going to diagnose you with a sugar and flour deficiency anytime soon. So if you wanted to give those 2 things up, I wouldn't cry about it. I find that most of my clients prefer not to give things up. I find that about 2/3 of them can make conditional rules, which make it possible for them to regulate them. For example, a conditional rule might be, I'll never have flour again except for a restaurant once a week where I can have, 2 slices at my leisure, right? Um, I find that about 2/3 of people are able to do that. The key for them is really delineating and making the decision beforehand. Saying I'll have a little flour once in a while doesn't work. Saying I'll have 2 slices of bread at a restaurant once per calendar week, that works because you're not leaving any decisions to chance. You're not leaving it up to the pig to make any decisions whatsoever.
Yes.
So I don't think most people have to give up most things, but I can't really tell who's going to be part of the 2/3 and who's going to be part of the 1/3. So I tell people, look, it's a risk to take. You might suffer for it if you're wrong, but on the other hand, it's probably 2 to 1 that you will be able to do it. And if you can do it, then you have more freedom. So it's up to you. I can't have chocolate at all. I've tried 23 ways to Sunday to figure out some conditional way to have chocolate. And, I fought a war with a chocolate bar a long time ago and I lost, and I've accepted that.
Yes, I feel like most people will. It's you design your plan and you see what's working for you, and what's not, right? So for me, when I was creating the plan, my first plan wasn't strict enough for me. So after a couple of months, I put a lot of to never, because
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't deal with it. I couldn't condition myself with chocolate or something like that. If I'll have a little bit, I'll have more. My pig was just
I mean,
crazy.
what you have to remember is that a lot of these things are designed to break your hungry and full meters. Remember, I talked about targeting the bliss point in your reptilian brain without giving you the nutrition to feel satisfied. Um, they break your hungry and full meters, and they also make you less interested in the places that nutrition are. Places that nutrition are. I don't speak so very many, but I does the best what I is. Um, if you eat a chocolate bar every day, then an apple is no longer going to taste sweet to you, and you're not going to enjoy the subtlety of and nuances of flavors between a Gala apple or a Fuji apple or a delicious apple. And most people in today's society will say they just don't like fruit and vegetables. They know that in order to eat better and get healthier or to lose weight, they're going to have to eat more fruit and vegetables. But most people say it's hopeless because they're never going to enjoy fruit and vegetables. So the good news is that it works in reverse also. If you stop having the chocolate bar all the time, then you'll start to your taste buds double in sensitivity, and you can start to taste the differences again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's neutral adaptation. Is one bite off of your food plan is a binge?
Well, I define it like that, but I define a binge like I define a miss in archery. It just means that you missed the bullseye. It doesn't mean that you should go to town, right? It doesn't mean that the pig is free until the end of the day. It just means that you have a very clearly defined bullseye and you're paying attention to when you're even one bite off it, and then you get right back on. Um, the reason people are frightened of that statement is because most people believe that it's like they're making a decision in their head. Am I binging now or am I not binging now? And if I'm binging now, yippee, let's go and go to town. I don't think we should ever make that decision. I think we should have I think we could have the bullseye. We can have a couple of rungs around the bullseye. Like maybe you want to loosen things up on Christmas, New Year's, and Thanksgiving or something, or on your birthday. I think that you can do things differently on the weekends or on vacation than you do during the week. But I think we should know exactly what we're aiming at, because if you don't know what you're aiming at, you're going to hit something else. So why play blind archery? Why aim at a fuzzy target?
Right. That's absolutely right. Will you feel tortured and deprived forever if you permanently change your diet?
You won't feel deprived and tortured forever because your taste buds and your nervous system will upregulate to the foods that are still available. So that's what I was talking about before. Your nervous system downregulates its pleasure response when you give it a chocolate every day. Eventually, by the way, when you do that, people say they just need the chocolate to feel normal. They don't even get a lot of pleasure out of it anymore. But when you stop having the chocolate, then you'll be surprised at how good fruit and vegetables taste eventually. You don't have to believe me, you just have to do it. And give it a month or two and you'll be surprised. The other thing that people don't understand is that because we live in this overstimulated world, not just with food, by the way, but with all the car chases and scene changes and nudity and explosions and everything that we see on television and in the movies, we're expecting to have this constant influx of stimulation. And we expect that in our mouths also. When you let go of that constant stimulation, the initial experience is one of boredom. You say, wait a minute, this is what life is, but this is how life is supposed to be. You're not supposed to be being chased by a lion every moment of every day. You're not supposed to have, the opportunity to see a mate every moment of every day. You're not supposed to be explosions and, trips to the moon and everything like that. That's not reality. Reality is, it's nice outside. Let's go for a walk. Let's breathe. Not much is happening. It's okay, right? And you have to take a while and get used to that, because on the other side of boredom, what'll happen is your pleasure system will adjust and it'll start to seek things that are more meaningful and purposeful for you. So not just food. So, yes, now I'll have a kale and banana smoothie rather than having a chocolate bar, and it tastes just as good to me. I don't get the same high that I used to, but it tastes delicious and I feel very content with it. But the energy that was involved in thinking about food all the time now goes to thinking about, well, how can I make a contribution, and how can I take care of my sister and her kids, and can I find love and all that kind of thing. So
Yes, thank you.
yeah.
Thank you so much. And this is what I actually discovered when I got rid of that. I was constantly thinking about food choices, talking about food, like what I'm going to eat. So it was constantly on the background. And when that disappeared, I'm like, wow, I had all this noise all the time on the back. And as you said, like when it was gone, now here I am, I'm sharing and I want more people to know. But before that,
Yeah.
I couldn't be that generous with my time, with my money, with anything.
Did you notice that more people are smiling at you? Did you notice that? There's just a lot more pleasant affect around there. There's nastiness around also, but I I noticed that everybody was smiling at me when I stopped overeating, and I finally realized that they were always smiling. I just was so busy thinking about the food, and all of my pleasure-seeking apparatus was thinking about food, that I didn't think to enjoy the smiles. So
Yes, yes,
yeah.
absolutely. If someone has tried a million times and failed, how can those people try to do it again with confidence?
Well, okay, so I'm going to talk directly to the people out there that are feeling like that. Um, the odds are, if you tried a million times and failed, that you've done it in a way that mimics the nursery rhyme that says, when she was bad, when she was good, she was very, very good, but when she was bad, she was hard. And that's how most people approach food. They try really, really hard to diet really well. Maybe they'll go on a juice fast, or maybe they're going to have one meal a day for a while, or maybe they're going to eat just 800 calories for 3 months and get all the weight off. And so they put their body into a state of semi-starvation and restriction, and then inevitably it bounces back the other way. Because don't you think, from an evolutionary perspective, that if our bodies perceive that we're going through a period of scarcity of nutrients and calories, that as soon as it's available, we'd have to say, oh my God, we'd better hoard this. And so people are on this feast and famine roller coaster all the time. Diet up, diet up, diet up. And they don't really think to step off of that and have a very, very, very slow burn and lose the weight, 5 pounds a month, something like that. People don't do that. So that's one thing. When you recognize that you're done with dieting, you're done with the feast and famine mentality, you're never going to starve yourself again, and you're never going to have 20,000 calories in a day again. It's just going to be normal. You're just going to eat like a normal amount forever, and it's going to take a little while to take the weight off. That's okay. So that's one thing you can do. The second thing you can do is you can say, well, I never really had a clear separation between my constructive and destructive thoughts with food. See, most people say, well, I'll eat when I'm hungry and I'll stop when I'm full. But how do you know when you're really hungry? How do you know when you're really full? Especially when industry is spending billions of dollars to break your hungry and full meters. So if instead what you do is you look at the dangerous trigger foods that you have, the places where you get in trouble, and you think through your decisions beforehand and you codify them in rules, well, now, granted, you have to develop the muscle of, self-control like that, but now you don't have to make decisions all day about it. So you have more willpower to work this out. And it's very, very clear that any thought that suggests that you break your rule is your pig, that's your destructive thinking. And any thought that suggests that you stay with it is you, that's your constructive thinking. So now there's a really clear separation between what you want and what your reptilian brain wants. So that, and then you recognize that there are ways to get yourself out of the reptilian brain. If you, Laurie Hammond, a hypnotist, taught me this. If you breathe in for a count of 7, and then you breathe out for a count of 11, that signals your brain, you do that a couple of times, it signals your brain that you're not in a state of emergency, that it's okay to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which says it's time to rest and digest and look around and plan and be more strategic in the upper brain, as opposed to, hand over the chocolate and nobody gets hurt, right? That's the reptilian brain. So you take those breaths. You make a habit of taking those breaths to move yourself from your lower brain to your upper brain. Then you carry around something to write with, and you write down exactly what the pig is saying. If you don't do anything else, the act of writing is more of an upper brain activity than a lower brain activity. And so it takes you out of that emergency response into the place where you actually remember who you are and why you made the decisions in the first place. And then you can start to do things like look for the logical flaws in what your pig is saying, the reasons for breaking your rules. And you can start to refute them in detail, and you'll start to feel progressively more confident. And then you link it to why you want to do this in the first place. Like, I don't want to not have chocolate just to not have chocolate. I want to not have chocolate so I can be a confident, thin man who radiates a smiling presence and is free from cardiovascular worry and, has lots of energy to play with his niece and his nephew and, dogs and cats, and go out and be a, leader in the world and make a big difference and help 1 million people a year to stop binge eating. So you put that all together, and then this is not just a quote unquote, oh my God, I'm on a diet. No, that becomes a way of life, and you're becoming a different kind of person. See, I actually don't even have a rule anymore that says I'll never eat chocolate. I fell off my plan a couple of years ago. I don't know why, but I haven't had chocolate, not even one bite, because I became a person who doesn't eat chocolate. It just became part of who I am, part of my identity. And that's what you want. You want to change who you are with regards to food, so you're not on a perpetual diet. So.
Yes, thank you. That
Yeah.
was very same for me when I was dealing with cheese. I just one day said, I'm a person who doesn't eat cheese.
Yeah. There you go.
And
there you go.
It just released the problem.
I love it.
Yeah, it's very interesting. How do we deal with social pressure?
There's a technique I call the alternative love gift. And in order to understand why this works, you have to understand a couple of things about group psychology. See, there was a time in our evolution, probably, when individuality was a threat. Food was scarce. The labor of each member of the tribe was probably necessary. And if you refused to eat what was available and you became sick, or the tribe needed to take care of you, then that was not just a matter of personal opinion, it was dangerous to the tribe. So it wasn't so much, well, that person's a weirdo, they want to eat something different. It was, no, get back in line or we'll kill you, right? It was more like that. So understand that there is probably something in our DNA that really wants to eat like everybody else is eating, and then think about warring tribes making peace by breaking bread together, and proving to each other that they're not there to rape and pillage and steal, but they're there to forge an alliance and work together and live in harmony. then understand that even with families, when they're groups that you're with all the time, that there's a continuum from the safety of the group to what we would call an aggregate. Walk into an elevator, and let's say there are 5 or 6 people in the elevator. I guarantee that they're all standing as far apart as they possibly could, even before the pandemic. They're all standing as far apart as they could. They're not touching, they're not looking at each other, they're not touching each other. That elevator gets stuck between floors for 2 hours, then open the elevator doors. They might be playing cards, they might be sitting shoulder to shoulder, they loosen their ties, they're sitting, they're laughing, they're making jokes. There's a group norm that's developed, they've become a group. The first situation is when you walk into the elevator, we call that an aggregate, whereas the groupness at the end, when everything coheres and there are norms and culture, we call that a group. Okay, well, it turns out that even well-established groups move along that continuum when they don't meet for a while. So even with your family, let's say you haven't seen them for a month, when you're coming back, there's a little bit of fear of the aggregate. Are you here to be integrated into the tribe in a warm and loving way in terms of breaking bread, or are you a threat? This is all very unconscious and primitive. And I'm telling you this so that you understand that there are more to the social forces than just, oh, I want to eat what tastes good and what's convenient and I don't want to feel guilty about it, which is also there. So mom comes over to me and I'm walking back into the family and she's got a big piece of chocolate pie and she says, here, I made your favorite. Now, what am I going to do? Am I going to say, Mom, chocolate's not healthy for me? You know what the doctor says. Well, now I'm entering into an argument. I'm clearly saying I'm not going to adjust to your customs and norms. What you're doing is sick. What I want to do is healthy. I'm really taking her on. Now, you can do that. At some point, you might want to influence them and you might be ready for the fight, but you have to know that you're taking on a big fight and you don't want to go into battle with a plastic helmet. What I suggest people do instead, until they're really in control of their food, is they ask for an alternative love gift. Understand that mom is trying to love you back into the tribe. It might be a sick way to do it, but she's trying to love you back into the tribe. And so give her something that she can love you with. Mom, you know what? I had a little too much at lunch. Can I get some peppermint tea? Do you have any peppermint tea? You know what, Mom, I'm cold. Can I borrow one of Michael's sweaters? Or, I'm just dying to know what the score is of the game. Can I go turn on the TV? Give her something that she can do for you to welcome you back into the tribe so you can engage in some behavior that's in common with the rest of the tribe. And then the social pressure is diffused and you can shift the conversation and everything is fine. That's the best way that I know to diffuse the social pressure.
Yes, yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Glenn, is ending overeating complicated?
I think it's a lot less complicated than it's made out to be. I think it's complicated because of all the social forces we talked about. I think it's complicated because of the industrial profit incentives that are there. But if you don't get caught up in that, if you say, I don't have a disease, I have a healthy appetite that's been corrupted by industry. I shouldn't be ashamed, I should be angry. And if you make one simple rule, start with one simple rule and ask yourself, how does my pig want me to break this? You can call it a food monster, you can call it a junkyard dog. Just don't make it a cute pet. It does need to be something that represents the destructive side of you only. This is not like Gestalt therapy where you're trying to reintegrate disowned parts of you. You're not looking at your shadow. This is a biological urge that's gone wrong, and by definition, it's sociopathic. So we don't want to make it a cute animal that we're loving back to health. We want to make something that we really have to put into a cage, and unfortunately, we have to live with it. We can't cut it out of ourselves because it comes from the reptilian brain. But you make a simple rule, you watch yourself try to break it, and then when you see that thought is coming up that says you should break it, try to take yourself back up into your right mind, with the techniques that we talked about, breathing and writing and all that kind of stuff, and then try to ignore it. And the last piece is to do something healthy for yourself instead. So don't just white knuckle it and dismiss the urge. ask yourself, is there something that you're authentically hungry for, physically, mentally, spiritually? For me, chocolate, I was usually hungry for energy. I needed some type of green and fruit together. Sometimes it's because I was tired and I need to be able to give myself 10 or 15 minutes to just step out and close my eyes. Sometimes it's because I was lonely and I needed to call a friend or go get a hug. But keep asking yourself, how do I feed my authentic self once you move back into your upper brain? And miracles happen. It's not that complicated. It's just not that complicated.
Yes,
I
thank
don't think it is anyway. Yeah.
No, it's not. You know what helped me too when I realized that my pig will win if I will have a conversation. So the second I will hear the squeal, I would just not hear it. I would just stop. But if I would go into a conversation full on, the pig will win me every time.
Yes, because the dark logic can get to you. This is a way that I differ with the rational recovery people. I think that when it comes to food, if you can ignore it, then you should ignore it. Like if you say, well, that's the pig. I don't remember why it's wrong. I know that it is wrong. I'm not going to engage. Perfect. That's great. But if it starts to feel very seductive and you start to think that it's you, then you probably have to look at specifically what it's saying and disempower the logic within it. And this is because food is not a black and white addiction. You have to take the lion out of the cage and walk it around the block 3 times a day, whereas drugs or alcohol, you could just quit whenever you want to. So
Yes,
yeah,
exactly. You can't quit food at all.
you can't quit food. Some people come to me telling me they want to. They're scared of every food whatsoever. But
Yeah. Um, how do someone create a food plan for themselves?
you start with one simple rule. Start with one simple rule. What is the smallest thing that would have the biggest impact and turn the ship around in the right direction? Maybe I always put my fork down between bites. Maybe I'll never go back for seconds. Maybe I never eat standing up. Maybe I always start my day with 2 pure glasses of spring water and my supplements. Maybe I never go to bed without writing down a hypothetical plan for the next day. Start with a simple rule, and then once you feel for a week or so that you've got control with that, add another rule to, usually people will need to either modulate or eliminate some addictive food, or they'll need to make a volume control rule or something like that. But one rule at a time.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. So is it really possible to never binge again?
Yes. 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 As a practical matter, people make mistakes and get back up. And as they're installing different rules, some rules are easier. There are some rules you set up that you never have to make a mistake with again. A good example of that is people who decide to go kosher. A lot of them, they make the commitment, they say they're making the commitment to God, and they never have, they never have forbidden food again. Other rules, when you're giving up a significant source of calories like sugar or flour, people have a harder time because it takes them a while to figure out what to replace it with. And it's also a little more addictive in some ways. So it depends upon the rule, it depends upon what your pattern has been, it depends upon how long it's been going on. But you can't commit with the idea that I'm going to try for a little while, but it's eventually going to get me, because that's like not committing at all. That's like getting married and saying, honey, I really want to be faithful to you the rest of my life, but there are a lot of attractive women out there, and come on, right? Sooner or later, I'm going to slip. You can't do that. If you're going to get married, you got to get married. So I will never binge again. It's how you aim at the bullseye, no matter what. Yeah,
Yeah.
and then you'll be surprised. You become someone who doesn't do this and doesn't do that and does do this and does do that.
Yes, and it works. It
Yeah,
works.
yeah.
It's like as a magic, it works as a magic. Any last advice to the audience?
There are 2 quotes that I really like. And then I like to tell people where they can get a free copy of the book, if that's okay.
Absolutely. That's what I actually wanted to,
Yeah.
finish with, copies.
Peter McWilliams in the 1980s said, you can have anything you want, but you can't have everything you want. Our pigs would like to have everything, and we just can't. You could eat anything you want to if you're willing to deal with the consequences, like Doug Graham says. But you can't have everything you want. You can have anything you want, but not everything you want. So choosing is a key piece of getting better. I don't have chocolate, but I do have thinness, relatively. I'm not a skinny guy. I don't have chocolate, but I do have confidence and energy and good sleep and freedom from cardiovascular worry, and I've got my health. I can't have anything I want, but I can't have everything I want, but I could have anything I want. Then Jim Rohn said a life of discipline is better than a life of regret. And I find that to be very true. I think that people are afraid that freedom and discipline are diametrically opposed, but they're really not. One sits on top of the other. I was a jazz musician in my youth, and the only reason I could express my soul was because I had the discipline to practice the scales beforehand. When I get in my car and I turn the steering wheel approximately 30 degrees, the wheels turn approximately 30 degrees to go along with me because of the discipline of the engineer. And that's part of what empowers me to drive all around the state. If it wasn't for the discipline of those engineers, I wouldn't have the freedom to do that. My radius of locomotion would be much smaller. So discipline empowers freedom. Pick a discipline and keep going. That's where the essence of life is, I think. So I think there's this 2-year-old inside most of us that says, no, I don't want to, I won't follow rules, any rules, even my own rules. But if you're either going to be a slave to your pig or your pig will be a slave to you. So you can make the rules. I'm not going to tell you what to eat. I'm not going to take anything away from you. As a matter of fact, I lean towards trying to get people to eat more rather than less. But you can decide, and only you can decide. So you don't have to be frightened about all that stuff. You can change the rules later on. When you say, I will never have chocolate again, for example, what you're really saying is that is my bullseye now. And you have to present it to your pig as if it's set in stone, the same way that you talk to a 2-year-old. Like when my niece was 2 years old, I said, you can't ever cross the street without me, without holding my hand. Never, ever, ever, ever. I don't even want you thinking about crossing the street without holding my hand, ever. I didn't say, well, maybe when you're a big girl, because I don't want her having the image of running into the street without me. She's going to get hurt. She could get hurt. I don't even want the image in her head. She's too immature. Our pigs are too immature to understand that we might change things later on, but we're not. We can keep that from the pigs. So I will never eat chocolate again. That's how I paint a very clear line around the bullseye, and I present it to my pig like it's set in stone, but I can change it later if I really want to.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Would you please share where people can get your amazing book? And it's actually for free.
Yeah. If you go to neverbingeagain.com and you click the big red button and you sign up for the reader bonuses, I'll give you a free copy of the book in Kindle, Nook, or PDF format. I will also give you a free set of food plan starter templates. So we created a set of templates for whole foods people. We created one for ketogenic people. We created one for calorie counters, point counters, whatever your philosophy is. I imagine most people are plant-based like you and I here, but we call them starter templates because you need to adjust them for your own needs and take responsibility. We won't take responsibility for giving you a diet because we're not dietitians, but you'll see some examples. And then finally, I know this all sounds really weird. I know you must be thinking, well, why is Valeria talking to the psychologist who has a pig inside of him? And this sounds really harsh, but it's not. And so I recorded about a half a dozen coaching sessions in full, 45-minute coaching sessions that you can listen to so you can hear how compassionate a process it is and how it takes people from feeling hopeless and powerless and confused about food and desperate to feeling hopeful and powerful and excited and enthusiastic in just one session. So neverbingeagain.com, click the big red button.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Glenn Livingston, for being here with us today. Thank you for your generosity, for your vulnerability, and for your willingness to help people in those situations.
Thank you, dear. It was lovely. Thank you.